My Karen teacher insists that I'm lying about my mother having cancer. She ended up sucking at her job, so she decides to destroy another teacher's personal property. So I managed to get my revenge on her by forcing her to lose her job and any opportunity to find work for acting unprofessional. Here's exactly what happened. Before the story begins, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you can listen to more stories. This was in my grade 11 year of high school. My computer class had a year-long substitute teacher because our amazing teacher was out for a year working on a government contract. Our previous teacher was outstanding. He had 6 different classes in our classroom all happening at the same time, which were Computer Repair, Programming Level 1, Programming Level 2, Networking Level 1, Networking Level 2A, and Level 2B. He would give a lecture for each of the classes on a specific day of the week, Programming on Monday, Repair on Tuesday, and so on. We would all work in our own groups and everything went quite well. The next year came around and I found out that we had a sub for the year. I had 2 back-to-back blocks in this class because I was doing 2 courses. I wandered up to the class to see what kind of teacher we were dealing with, mainly interested because I was almost certain whoever they found did not have the credentials to teach at least half of those classes. The new teacher was a foreign woman that none of us have ever heard of before. For the purpose of the story, we will call her Mrs. S. I went and found my friends to tell them what I had seen. We were all optimistic because from a very short conversation, she seemed quite informed and had a good background. It didn't last long. On the first day of class, Mrs. S introduced herself as a programming teacher who had been in school for 4 years. She then told us that the programming students would not be doing the Java and C++ course we had signed up for and would instead be doing database and Excel because those are what she learned, and she said, and I quote, "They will be more useful than C and the Java." She also went on to suspend all at-lunch clubs because she didn't think high school students could be trusted with computers alone. Understandably, some of us were quite upset about that, considering that we had came there to program. She also did not give the repair people or the networking people any kind of support and completely stopped their lectures as well, preferring to let them figure it out themselves and self-teach without giving any of the resources to do so, and occasionally throwing out the tests pre-written by the last teacher for her. This continued for about 2 weeks, till one day she came in and said quite irritated that we would actually be doing the Java now unless we wanted to keep doing database. So we switched to Java and she basically left us out to dry from there. Because she wasn't teaching database anymore, she came to harass people in computer repair. First, she told us the shop room was too messy and made us throw out 90% of our training workstations and equipment because they were not important in her eyes. Equipment that did not belong to the school but actually belonged to the other teacher. We took home what we could steal for safekeeping, but she did end up throwing out a few thousand in equipment. Then she started imposing stupid rules on us such as, you can't have the computer on while you are troubleshooting inside because you could electrocute yourself. Or, you don't need the case open to troubleshoot motherboard lights. Or, my personal favorite, and the most scary, maybe you should change the power supply to 240 volts if you aren't getting enough power. We followed most of her stupid requests as much as we could, because she threatened to lock us out of the lab room and give us only textbook work if we didn't. Needless to say, it was a challenging time. One of the students in the networking area got fed up and started doing up his own coursework and lecturing to us so that we could get at least some kind of use out of the courses. To his credit, it was all very good, but Mrs. S had the balls to force him into doing it from there on out and then turn around and give him low grades for not getting his own work done in time. A few months of this very uneasy balance go by and my mother comes down with colon cancer. I've already had a handful of other family members suddenly taken from me by cancer, so understandably this is a very stressful time. I was joking with my friends and trying not to break down over the whole thing. I had a very unstable laptop running Linux that would crash if looked at funny, and had a horrible habit of corrupting the operating system when the battery died because the reserve shutdown sensor didn't work anymore. Battery always read 0% but would go on for an hour or two. While I was working on the school desktop computer, I had a few pages open that I was taking notes in, and a Facebook tab so I could keep in contact with my mother because she was in surgery and I was waiting for her to come out. I look over and teacher is snooping through my laptop, opening folders and closing windows, and eventually pushes the power button in till it shuts down. I asked her what the hell she thought she was doing, and she responded with, "You shouldn't be on Facebook or writing notes on a personal computer during class time, especially when your grades are slipping." Really glad she brought that up in front of everyone. I snapped out and told her that doesn't give her the right to touch my stuff, and she best hopes she hasn't corrupted my laptop. She told me if I keep my tone up, then I'll be in detention. So at this point, I'm trying to just keep calm because if I get too emotional, I have a tendency to explode. This is often made worse because of my mild autism. I took a second, then replied in a calmer tone. "I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time at home right now. My mother was diagnosed with colon cancer and I'm waiting to hear back. Now, I didn't want to bring this up, but I thought my teacher would have a bit of empathy for me and leave me be. How wrong I was. She has the nerve to say I don't look like a kid whose mother has cancer and I need to quit making sob story excuses. It took every fiber of my body not to stand up and slap the cow right there. I gave her the dirtiest 1,000-yard stare I think I've ever done while also trying not to burst out crying. I spoke to nobody for the rest of the day till I got home. People kept asking if I was okay and I ignored everyone. My mother was out of the hospital and home by the time I got there. I broke down crying and told her about my day. Her face was comforting, but you could see the fire of an angry woman behind her brown eyes. She told me not to worry and that it'd be okay. A few weeks passed and I was called into the office for a one-on-one parent-teacher conference someone forgot to tell me about. There were all the teachers I had that year, good and bad. My learning assistance teacher, the VP, and the principal herself. They told me that we were there to discuss my grade slippage as soon as my mother came. My mother was about 10 minutes late, leaving me to awkwardly sit with all these people. She comes in and is all smiles, and apologizes for being late, letting everyone know she got held up at hospital. That's when one of the teachers asked why she was in hospital, and my mother smiled and responded she was getting her cancer checked on. The room went cold, and her voice seemingly dripped with blood when she said it. My computers teacher went pale, and everyone in the room was giving a confused, "What on earth did you do?" look. My mother proceeded to relay me coming crying home about how I was treated to everyone present, while Mrs. S tried to become one with the wall of the small meeting room. She kept it short, but to paraphrase, added the following: "How dare you say something so careless to my son? I hope you are ashamed, and I hope you don't get invited back for another year." She then returned back to her normal happy self and discussed my grades like nothing happened, whilst half the teachers were still trying to figure out what just happened and told them that now she was out of the hospital, my grades should improve again. I just sat quiet the whole time and tried to suppress bursting out laughing. After that day, she never directly spoke to me again, had instructions relayed through other people, or gave them to the class as a whole. She did her damnedest to be nowhere near me and say nothing to me. My grades improved quite a bit and the year ended with me passing. Mrs. S was previously offered a job at the school as a secondary computer teacher, but after all the trouble, the job was pulled back. The next year when our first computer teacher returned, he was furious to learn most of his equipment and personal books had been thrown out. We returned the things that we snagged during the purge, but he still lost a few thousand in personal teaching stuff. The school paid him back with $10,000, but he says he lost so much more than that in time and preset handmade equipment. We told him all about the horror show and he gave us all an extensive test normally given at the end of the year, which the vast majority of us failed. We ended up redoing all the computer courses from the previous year because in his words, she didn't even teach us the basics. That sub can no longer teach in this or the neighboring districts. You really did put up with a lot. It sounds like you handled yourself very well in the face of all this adversity, and I'm proud of you for that. You're right to be proud of yourself too. There were many things you could have done differently, but I think that overall, you made some very smart decisions about how to handle the situation, especially by not snapping out and lashing at your teacher when she said the most disrespectful thing she could. I don't see how a teacher can get any more unprofessional than claiming one of her students is lying about their mother having cancer just to make a sob story. I can't believe she really said that. But I'm glad that you and your mother got your revenge on the parents' evening. She had to pay for her actions, and it wouldn't be right to let her continue teaching when she clearly can't make the kids feel safe. Hope you're feeling better now with your original teacher back, and I'm wishing your mother a speedy recovery. Do you guys think Karen teacher should have been fired? I think the answer is pretty obvious. Let me know in the comments. My art teacher called my work bad and my attitude even worse. It then got featured in the biggest art gallery in the country. I hated art growing up, but it was a mandatory subject until you got to choose your subject in year 10. Needless to say, I dropped the subject ASAP. Despite hating the subject, I still put effort into my work, and some of it wasn't bad. However, at the same time, I would not hide away from expressing my views when we were given a task that I didn't see a point to, even if the teacher was in earshot. Needless to say, my relationship with the art department faculty wasn't the best. My teacher at the time particularly had it in for me. He was one of those teachers that has the view that their subject should be your most important subject, regardless of your future ambitions. If he thought that you weren't prioritizing art, then he would make your life hell. Yet again, I hated art as a subject. He knew this, but I would still do any work set to the best of my ability. We had just finished a project where we had to mix different pigments to create our own unique color. Being colorblind, I struggled a lot as I literally could not differentiate between half of the pigments. I gave it my all but ended up giving up halfway through the project. My teacher hated me for giving up. In his defense, he had tried to make it as easy as possible for me, but I hated the subject and saw a way out, so I took it. My teacher was beyond mad. When we went to hand the project in, he gave me a lecture about how I need to put in more effort and work harder because the quality of work was unacceptable. Remember, I literally couldn't see half of the project. Once that project was finished, my teacher told us that Gallery X has asked us that we create some inspired art. We were basically shown 5 different paintings that we were supposed to recreate in our own way. There was a big fuss about this. People were saying that art schools would be giving out scholarships, that there was a $10,000 reward and other nonsense that 14-year-olds make up. But nevertheless, everyone wanted to be the one to have their painting in Gallery X. So for the next month and a half in my art classes, we would work on our piece. After the first week of working my piece, the excitement of the new project wore off, and so did my eagerness in lessons. My teacher noticed this and went from complimenting my work to yelling at me about what I was doing wrong. By the fourth week, I was over the project and just wanted to be done with this. With 2 weeks left on the project, my teacher pulls me aside to tell me that my work isn't good enough and I need to improve it. I tried to improve, but he kept on belittling me. So out of arrogance and spite, I made art my most important subject until the end of this project. I dragged myself to each lesson, quietly working myself to the bone, counting down the days until the deadline of the project. After what seemed like a year to 14-year-old me, the second to last session arrives. This lesson was not for final touches or anything like that. My teacher had decided that he should review what each student had done well and where they could have improved. He walks around the classroom complimenting everyone's work until he gets to mine. I don't remember exactly what he said, but I'm pretty sure none of it was positive. I do remember, however, he said, "You can tell that OP hasn't given this any thought and hasn't taken this seriously." That stung like a bee because yes, I had lost interest in it, but I had still worked hard in lessons and given it my best shot. The bell then went, and I sulked out of class with my tail between my legs. The last lesson finally comes, and I can't wait to be over with this stupid subject. This lesson was the big one too. The judges from Gallery X were coming to school to judge all of the work. They come into our class, do all of the formalities. "These all look so good. I have no idea how we can decide on only one," etc. Then they start walking around the room muttering to each other. The whole class stood silently at the back trying to hear what they were saying. They do a full lap of the room, then walk back over to my spot. I don't even notice this as I had tuned out after they had looked at the second painting. They then ask the teacher whose work they are stood over. He looks at them in almost disbelief as he gestures to me. I snap out of my daydream and just smile politely with no idea what is going on. The judges then confer for a while, whilst my teacher and I frantically try and figure out what is going on. Finally, after about 5 minutes of mumbling, they say that they want to shortlist it to potentially be shown in Gallery X. I look at them in shock, then yet again smile politely and say thank you. I cannot begin to describe the look on my teacher's face. I don't think I've ever seen someone more confused, angry, and disappointed all at the same time. My teacher then begrudgingly thanks the judges and walks them to the door. He thanks them again as they leave, then stumbles back to class. He doesn't even congratulate me on my work. He just defeatedly says, "Good work, everyone. As a reward, I'll put on a documentary for you all to watch." And he did just that, not saying another thing until the end of class. Later on that week, I got an email from Gallery X asking for my permission to display my work, of which I happily said yes to. To sum it up, the work that he disrespected and said that no effort went into was selected from 192 others, got featured in the biggest art gallery in the country. Congratulations on being the selected one to have your work featured. You really did prove your teacher wrong. It seems like he really is just trying to look out for all the students and make them produce the best work possible. But in some instances, like when you were working with colors, it does seem like he is singling you out. In the end, I guess things worked out as you shocked him by producing the best work despite his thoughts on it being nothing but negative. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Check out the other videos on your screen right now. Otherwise, you're definitely the jerk.